Sit down and shut up, boy. This is a real court, not some ghetto street corner. Judge Patricia Whitmore's hand flies through the air. The slap connects with Dr. Elijah Washington's face in front of 200 shocked witnesses. His head snaps to the side. A red handprint blooms across his dark cheek. Cell phones shoot up like weapons. Everyone's recording. Washington doesn't touch his face. His eyes meet the judge's with terrifying calm. "Get this thug out of my sight," Whitmore snarls, pointing a shaking finger. "Contempt of court. Maximum penalty." Washington straightens his expensive tie. His voice cuts through the chaos like steel. "Your Honor, this will be noted in the record." The bailiffs hesitate. Something about this man's composure chills the room. Whitmore's face goes pale as Washington's words hang in the air with the weight of prophecy. Have you ever watched someone seal their own fate? Because what Judge Whitmore just did would destroy her completely. But let's back up. Who is Dr. Elijah Washington? And what brought him to Judge Whitmore's courtroom on this Tuesday morning that would change everything? 3 hours earlier, Washington sits in his silver Mercedes outside the courthouse. At 42, he carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone who's argued cases in rooms where decisions shape nations. His charcoal suit costs more than most people's monthly salary. Gold cufflinks catch the morning light. His phone buzzes. Third call from a D.C. area code. He declines it again. Washington pulls a worn photo from his wallet. A younger black man in graduation robes, smiling wide. Marcus Thompson, his best friend from Harvard Law. The photo's edges are soft from handling. Marcus should be here today, should be fighting cases, changing lives, making partner at some prestigious firm. Instead, he's buried in Atlanta after Judge Whitmore destroyed his career 3 years ago. The courthouse looms before Washington like a concrete monument to justice, or injustice, depending on who you ask. This building has seen 40 years of trials, verdicts, and appeals. The marble steps are worn smooth by thousands of feet seeking fairness. Today, those steps will witness something unprecedented. Inside, Washington moves through security with practiced ease. The metal detector barely slows him down. His briefcase slides through the scanner leather exterior, federal-grade locks, contents invisible to the guard's bored eyes. "Morning, counselor," the bailiff nods. Even they can sense something different about this man. The way he carries himself. The way his eyes survey everything, cataloging details. "Good morning, Officer Martinez," Washington replies, reading the name tag with the precision of someone trained to remember every detail. Room 301. Judge Patricia Whitmore presided for the past 15 years. Her courtroom smells of old wood and fresh fear. The gallery seats are packed with families, their nervous energy thick as humidity before a storm. These people have seen too many plea deals, too many harsh sentences, too many dreams crushed by a system that should protect them. Malik Stevens sits at the defendant's table, 19 years old and terrified. Full scholarship to State University on the line, engineering major with a 3.8 GPA. His grandmother clutches a rosary in the front row, lips moving in silent prayer. "You must be the fancy lawyer," Malik whispers as Washington sits down. His voice shakes like autumn leaves. "Just focus on the truth," Washington replies. His briefcase opens with twin clicks that sound like bullets loading. Legal files, precedents, constitutional law references. But also something else. A thin folder marked Internal Investigation, Judicial Misconduct Patterns. The prosecution table holds Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Clark. 28 years old, ambitious as a hawk. She's built her career on conviction rates, not justice. Her evidence box looks thin, desperate. The drug charges against Malik rest on a search that violated the Fourth Amendment so badly it should be thrown out immediately. But Whitmore has a reputation. She doesn't throw out evidence when it comes to young black men. Her sentencing statistics tell a story that would make civil rights lawyers weep. 40% longer sentences for black defendants. Dismissed motions that should have been granted. A pattern so clear it screams from the data like a siren. Washington's phone buzzes again. This time he glances at the screen. Attorney General's office. Urgent. He powers it off completely. The courtroom deputy calls the session to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Whitmore. She enters like a queen claiming her throne. 61 years old, silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Her black robes billow as she climbs to the bench. For 15 years, this woman has wielded a gavel like a weapon against anyone who doesn't look like her suburban neighbors. Whitmore's eyes scan the courtroom and stop in Washington. Something flickers across her face, irritation mixed with curiosity. She's not used to seeing lawyers of his caliber in her courtroom. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the way he organizes his papers with military precision. "State your appearances for the record," she commands. "Jennifer Clark for the state of Georgia, Your Honor. Dr. Elijah Washington for the defendant, Your Honor." His voice carries the weight of credentials she can't see yet. Harvard Law Review, Rhodes Scholar, constitutional law expert. And something else that would terrify her if she knew. "Doctor?" Whitmore's eyebrow arches. "How refreshing. Let's see what fancy theories you've brought to my real courtroom." The insult lands exactly as intended. The gallery shifts uncomfortably. Malik's grandmother stops praying. Even Ada Clark looks surprised at the immediate hostility. Washington doesn't react. He simply opens his first legal folder with the calm of someone who has argued before the Supreme Court. But what Judge Whitmore doesn't know is that this case isn't random. Washington isn't here by accident, and the federal investigation into her courtroom has been building for 8 months. Today, it all comes to a head. "Your Honor, the defense moves to suppress all evidence obtained during the illegal search of my client's vehicle." Washington's voice cuts through the courtroom like a blade through silk. He stands with perfect posture, legal brief in hand. Every word is measured, professional, devastating. Judge Whitmore's jaw tightens. She's heard this motion before, usually from overworked public defenders who stumble through constitutional arguments like children reciting multiplication tables. This is different. This man speaks with the authority of someone who helped write the textbooks. "On what grounds, counselor?" Her voice drips condescension like honey from a broken jar. "Fourth Amendment violation, Your Honor." Officer Johnson lacked probable cause to search the vehicle. No warrant, no consent, no exigent circumstances. The traffic stop was pretextual at best. The precision stings. Washington lays out the constitutional law with surgical accuracy. He cites cases that most lawyers have never heard of. Miranda, Terry, Mapp versus Ohio. Each precedent builds on the last like stones in an unshakable wall. A. Clark shifts nervously. Her entire case rests on the evidence found in that search. 47 grams of marijuana that transforms Malik from scholarship student to felon. Without it, she has nothing but a minor traffic violation. The traffic stop report shows Officer Johnson observed the defendant driving erratically. Clark interjects, her voice thin as paper. Washington turns toward her with the patience of a professor correcting a struggling student. "Driving 2 miles over the speed limit hardly constitutes erratic behavior, counselor, particularly when the same officer stopped 3 other young black men in the same area within 2 weeks. The courtroom gallery murmurs. Malik's grandmother leans forward. This is the first time anyone has connected those dots publicly. "That's enough," Whitmore snaps. Her gavel cracks against the bench like a gunshot. "I won't have you turning my courtroom into a sociology lecture. I'm simply presenting relevant constitutional law, Your Honor. What you're presenting is a bunch of liberal activist nonsense. This is a drug case, not a civil rights rally." The insult hangs in the air like smoke. Washington doesn't flinch. He's heard worse from better judges than Patricia Whitmore. Instead, he opens his second legal folder. "Your Honor, I have additional precedents that directly apply to this situation. I don't want to hear your precedents. Sit down. Your Honor, with respect, the defendant has a constitutional right to— I said sit down. Whitmore's voice echoes off the marble walls. Her face flushes red as a traffic light. You don't come into my courtroom and lecture me about the law. I've been doing this since you were probably stealing cars in whatever ghetto you crawled out of. The gallery gasps. Someone's phone starts recording. The court reporter's fingers freeze over her keyboard. Washington remains standing. His voice stays level, professional. Your Honor, I object to the court's characterization and request that those remarks be stricken from the record. You object? Whitmore laughs, but there's no humor in it. You arrogant piece of— She catches herself, glances at the gallery. Motion denied. Evidence stands. We're moving to sentencing. Your Honor, you haven't ruled on the suppression motion. I just did. Denied. On what legal grounds? Because I said so. Whitmore's knuckles are white as she grips her gavel. That's all the grounds I need in my courtroom. Washington opens his mouth to respond, but Whitmore cuts him off with a slash of her hand. One more word and I'll hold you in contempt. Don't test me, boy. I've seen your type before. Coming in here with your fancy degree, thinking you can intimidate me with big words and constitutional theories. Well, this isn't Harvard Law School. This is the real world, where real judges make real decisions. The contempt in her voice makes the air itself feel poisonous. Every person in that courtroom can feel the racial undertones dripping from her words like acid. Washington sets his legal brief on the table with deliberate care. When he speaks, his voice carries the quiet authority of someone who has never backed down from a fight. Your Honor, the Constitution applies in every courtroom in America, including this one. How dare you lecture me about the Constitution? Whitmore rises from her bench like an avenging angel. You think because you memorized some law books that makes you better than me? I've been protecting this community from thugs like your client for 15 years. My client is a 19-year-old honor student with no criminal record. Your client is a drug dealer. Alleged drug dealer. And even if convicted, he deserves constitutional protection. Constitutional protection? Whitmore's laugh is sharp as broken glass. The only thing your kind understands is a firm hand and serious consequences. Maybe if more judges had the backbone to impose real punishment, we wouldn't have animals running wild in the streets. The word animals hits the courtroom like a physical blow. Malik's grandmother starts crying. Other family members shift angrily in their seats. Washington's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Your Honor, I move for an immediate mistrial based on judicial misconduct and bias. Motion denied. Your Honor, I said the motion was denied. Whitmore's voice cracks like a whip. Mr. Stevens, stand up. Based on your guilty plea to possession with intent to distribute, I sentence you to 15 years in state prison. My client hasn't entered any plea, Your Honor. Then he's entering one now. Guilty as charged. That's not how this works. The defendant has rights. Sit down and shut up, boy. This is a real court, not some ghetto street corner. The insult hangs in the air like a loaded gun. Washington stands perfectly still, but something dangerous flickers in his eyes. This is the moment everything changes. Your Honor, I must object to this entire proceeding. You're violating my client's Fifth Amendment rights, his Sixth Amendment rights, and basic due process. This isn't justice. It's a railroad. Whitmore's face turns purple. She stands up behind her bench, pointing at Washington like an Old Testament prophet calling down divine wrath. How dare you? How dare you come into my courtroom and tell me how to do my job, you arrogant, uppity— She stops herself, but everyone knows what word almost escaped her lips. Bailiff, arrest this man for contempt of court. Maximum penalty. Your Honor, please reconsider. I've heard enough from you. Whitmore's hand flies through the air without warning. The slap connects with Washington's face in front of 200 shocked witnesses. His head snaps to the side. A red handprint blooms across his dark cheek. Cell phones shoot up like weapons. Everyone's recording. Washington doesn't touch his face. Don't step back. His eyes meet the judge's with terrifying calm. Something flickers there. Not pain, not anger. Knowledge. "Get this thug out of my sight," Whitmore snarls, pointing a shaking finger. "Contempt of court. Maximum penalty." Washington straightens his expensive tie. His voice cuts through the chaos like steel. "Your Honor, this will be noted in the record." The bailiffs hesitate. Something about this man's composure chills the room. Whitmore's face goes pale as Washington's words hang in the air with the weight of prophecy. But she's gone too far to back down now. "Remove him." Now. As the handcuffs click around Washington's wrists, he looks directly into the nearest cell phone camera. His voice is calm, measured, final. "My name is Dr. Elijah Washington. What you just witnessed will be forwarded to the appropriate federal authorities. The courtroom erupts in chaos, but Judge Whitmore has no idea that she just assaulted the most dangerous man she could have possibly chosen. The federal investigation into her courtroom is about to become very personal. The holding cell smells of disinfectant and broken dreams." Dr. Elijah Washington sits on the concrete bench, his expensive suit wrinkled but his composure intact. His left cheek still bears the faint outline of Whitmore's handprint. Outside, the world explodes. The cell phone videos hit social media like wildfire in dry grass. Within 30 minutes, #JudgeSlapsLawyer is trending on Twitter. The footage spreads across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Millions of people watch a federal prosecutor get assaulted by a racist judge, though they don't know his true identity yet. The headlines write themselves, "Judge physically assaults defense attorney in open court." Shocking courtroom violence caught on camera. Is this justice in America? Local news stations interrupt regular programming. The video plays on loop, Whitmore's hand striking Washington's face, his unnaturally calm response, the chaos that follows. News anchors struggle to find words for what they're witnessing. "This is unprecedented," says Channel 7's legal analyst, her voice tight with disbelief. "I've covered courts for 20 years. Judges don't hit lawyers. This crosses every line of professional conduct." By hour 2, the story goes national. CNN picks it up. Fox News leads with it. MSNBC brings in constitutional law experts who can barely contain their outrage. "What we're seeing here is a complete breakdown of judicial ethics," Professor Sarah Martinez from Georgetown Law explains to Anderson Cooper. "This isn't just misconduct. This is assault, in open court, on camera." The Georgia Bar Association issues an emergency statement calling for investigation. Legal organizations across the country demand answers. Civil rights groups mobilize within hours. But inside the courthouse, chaos reigns. Court Administrator Helen Rodriguez paces her office like a caged animal. Her phone hasn't stopped ringing since the videos went viral. Reporters, lawyers, angry citizens, federal officials whose voices carry the weight of consequences. "Ma'am, we need to discuss containment," her assistant whispers, clutching a stack of media requests 3 inches thick. "Containment?" Rodriguez laughs bitterly. "This ship isn't just sinking. It's already on the ocean floor." Judge Whitmore sits in her chambers behind locked doors, her black robes hanging on the door like a funeral shroud. She's made 3 calls to her lawyer, 2 to her husband, and 1 to the chief judge. None of them had good news. The defense she practiced in the mirror sounds hollow even to her own ears. "He was being disrespectful. I had to maintain order in my courtroom. But even she knows it won't work. You can't maintain order by committing assault." Meanwhile, in the holding cell, Washington makes his 1 phone call. The number he dials isn't his wife, isn't a lawyer, isn't anyone the booking officer would expect. "Attorney General's office, this is Director Patricia Hayes." "Patricia, it's Elijah." Jesus Christ, Elijah, what happened? The entire building is buzzing about some video. Her voice stops as understanding dawns. Oh my God, that was you. Phase 1 of the investigation is complete. I have everything we need on Judge Whitmore. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Washington touches his cheek where the red mark is finally fading. I'm fine. But we need to move quickly. The media attention changes our timeline. The press conference is already being prepared. FBI is en route to secure the courthouse records. We've been waiting for probable cause, and Judge Whitmore just handed it to us on national television. The call lasts exactly 3 minutes. When Washington hangs up, he looks almost satisfied, like a chess master who's just moved his queen into position for checkmate. Outside the holding cell, the booking officer shakes his head. 30 years on the job, and he's never seen anything like this. Lawyers usually panic when they're arrested. They make frantic calls to partners, wives, bail bondsmen. This guy called the federal government like he was ordering pizza. Something's not right about that one, Officer Martinez mutters to his partner. Too calm, too collected. Acts like he's been planning this. His partner glances through the cell window at Washington, who's now reading a legal journal he somehow procured. Maybe he's just in shock. Maybe. Or maybe we're about to find out why he wasn't worried about getting arrested. By evening, the video has 20 million views. Legal experts flood cable news shows. The Georgia Judicial Conduct Board announces an emergency review. Protesters begin gathering outside the courthouse with signs reading, "Justice for all," and "No judge above the law." Malik Stevens sits in his grandmother's kitchen, watching his case become national news. The scholarship committee has already called. They're not rescinding the offer, they're accelerating it. Get him out of Georgia before Judge Whitmore can do more damage. That lawyer sacrificed everything for you, his grandmother says, rosary still clutched in her weathered hands. Pray for him tonight. But if she only knew the truth, she'd realize Dr. Elijah Washington doesn't need prayers. He needs Judge Patricia Whitmore to keep digging herself deeper into a hole that federal investigators have been preparing for 8 months. And tomorrow morning, when the FBI arrives with search warrants, her world will finally collapse completely. The Attorney General's press conference begins at 10 a.m. sharp. Director Patricia Hayes steps to the podium in the Department of Justice briefing room. The seal of the United States gleams behind her like a golden shield. Reporters pack the room, cameras rolling, the energy electric with anticipation. Yesterday's events in Judge Patricia Whitmore's courtroom represent a shocking abuse of judicial power, Hayes begins, her voice carrying the authority of federal law. But what the public doesn't know is that the man she assaulted isn't just any defense attorney. The room falls silent. Every reporter leans forward. Dr. Elijah Washington is the chief federal prosecutor for the Civil Rights Division. He has served the Department of Justice for 12 years, arguing cases before the Supreme Court, leading investigations into systemic discrimination, and upholding the constitutional rights of all Americans. The bombshell hits like a nuclear explosion. Reporters' hands shoot up like rockets. The camera flashes strobe like lightning. The revelation changes everything. Hayes continues with the calm precision of someone delivering a death sentence. For the past 8 months, Dr. Washington has been conducting an undercover federal investigation into discriminatory sentencing patterns in Judge Whitmore's courtroom. What happened yesterday was not random. It was the culmination of a comprehensive civil rights investigation. The footage plays on screens across America. The same slap, but now viewers see it with new eyes. This isn't just a racist judge attacking a defense lawyer. This is a federal crime caught on camera. Assault on a federal officer. Obstruction of justice. Civil rights violations under color of law. Back in the holding cell, Washington finally allows himself a small smile as the guards approach with keys. His true identity is spreading across social media faster than the original video. Hashtag federal prosecutor trends alongside hashtag justice for Washington. "You're being released," Officer Martinez says, but his voice carries a different tone now. Respect mixed with bewilderment. "Sir." As Washington steps into the courthouse lobby, reporters surge forward like a breaking wave. Questions fly from every direction. "Dr. Washington, how long have you been investigating Judge Whitmore? Was this assault part of your investigation? What charges will be filed?" Washington pauses at the courthouse steps, the same marble steps where justice is supposed to be served. His voice carries across the crowd with the authority of someone who speaks for the United States of America. "For 8 months, our investigation has documented a pattern of discriminatory sentencing in Judge Whitmore's courtroom. African American defendants receive sentences averaging 40% longer than white defendants for identical crimes. Constitutional motions are dismissed without proper consideration. Due process is regularly violated." The crowd of reporters hangs on every word. This isn't just breaking news anymore. This is history. Yesterday's assault was witnessed by 200 people and recorded by multiple cameras, but it was also the final piece of evidence we needed to demonstrate that this judge has no respect for the law, the Constitution, or the people she's sworn to serve. Behind him, FBI agents emerge from the courthouse carrying boxes of records. Search warrants were executed at dawn. 15 years of case files, sentencing records, and court transcripts now belong to the federal government. The investigation that began as a statistical analysis has become a federal civil rights case with television cameras rolling and the whole nation watching. But the real shock comes when Washington reveals the personal dimension of his mission. 3 years ago, Judge Whitmore humiliated and destroyed the career of my friend and colleague, Marcus Thompson. Marcus was a brilliant young attorney who made one mistake: he challenged her authority. She railroaded his client, filed frivolous bar complaints against Marcus, and used her influence to destroy his reputation. Marcus couldn't handle the pressure. He took his own life 6 months later. The courthouse steps fall silent. Even the traffic seems to pause as Washington's words sink in. Marcus never got justice. But every defendant who appears in Judge Whitmore's courtroom deserves better than what Marcus received. They deserve a judge who follows the law instead of her own prejudices. The revelation adds a deeply personal element to the federal investigation. This isn't just about statistics and constitutional violations. This is about a federal prosecutor who went undercover to get justice for his dead friend and hundreds of other victims. The media narrative shifts instantly. Dr. Elijah Washington becomes a hero fighting systemic racism. Judge Patricia Whitmore becomes the villain who assaulted a federal officer on camera. Legal experts flood the airwaves with analysis. "This is unprecedented," Harvard law professor Charles Ogletree tells CNN. "A sitting federal prosecutor conducting undercover investigations into judicial misconduct. It's brilliant, it's dangerous, and it's absolutely necessary." "Judge Whitmore is finished," adds former federal prosecutor Preet Bharara on MSNBC. "You cannot assault a federal officer. You cannot obstruct a federal investigation. And you certainly cannot do both on live television." By noon, the Georgia Judicial Conduct Board announces Judge Whitmore's immediate suspension. The chief judge issues a statement calling her actions wholly incompatible with judicial service. The governor promises a full investigation, but the federal charges are what will destroy her completely. In her chambers, Whitmore watches the press coverage with growing horror. Her lawyer sits across from her, his face grave as a funeral director's. "Patricia, they have you on video assaulting a federal officer. The sentencing statistics show clear bias. The pattern of constitutional violations is documented across hundreds of cases. We need to discuss a plea agreement." "A plea agreement?" Whitmore's voice cracks like thin ice. "I'm a judge. I don't plead guilty to anything." "You were a judge. Now you're a defendant facing federal civil rights charges. And the evidence against you was personally compiled by one of the best prosecutors in the country." The man she dismissed as an uppity thug is actually the most dangerous adversary she could have faced. Dr. Elijah Washington doesn't just know the law, he's spent 12 years prosecuting people exactly like her. And now, with the entire nation watching, he's about to demonstrate what happens when the system actually works the way it's supposed to. Judge Patricia Whitmore's 15-year reign of judicial terror is about to end in federal prison. The FBI task force arrives at dawn like an army of accountability. Special Agent Rebecca Lane leads 20 federal investigators through the courthouse doors. Their black suits and badges gleam under fluorescent lights as they execute search warrants with surgical precision. 15 years of corruption documented in filing cabinets and computer hard drives. The smell of old legal files and fresh federal authority fills the courthouse corridors. Court employees watch in stunned silence as agents photograph evidence, seal boxes, and transform their workplace into a crime scene. Dr. Washington stands in the courthouse lobby, no longer a defendant, but the lead prosecutor on the biggest civil rights case Georgia has seen in decades. His briefcase now overflows with 8 months of painstakingly gathered evidence. The red mark on his cheek has faded, but the memory of Whitmore's assault burns bright as a branding iron. "Agent Chen, we'll need every case file from 2010 forward," Washington instructed, his voice carrying the authority of the federal government. "Pay special attention to sentencing disparities between white and black defendants for identical charges." The statistics tell a story that would make civil rights pioneers weep. In Judge Whitmore's courtroom, white defendants convicted of drug possession averaged 18 months imprisonment. Black defendants with identical charges and criminal histories averaged 30 months. The math is brutal, undeniable, racist. Constitutional motions filed by white attorneys, granted 67% of the time. The same motions filed by black attorneys, granted 23% of the time. The disparity screams systemic bias loud enough to wake the dead. But the human stories behind those numbers hit harder than any statistic. Teresa Williams sits across from Washington in the federal building conference room. Sunlight streams through tall windows as she recounts her son's case with hands that shake like autumn leaves. 22 years old, first offense, caught with marijuana. Judge Whitmore sentenced him to 5 years in state prison. "The white boy arrested the same day got probation," Teresa whispers, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Same amount of drugs, same charge. Same lawyer even. But my baby's been in prison for 3 years because that judge looked at his black skin and saw a criminal instead of a college student." The pattern repeats across hundreds of cases like a broken record of injustice. Michael Rodriguez, sentenced to 10 years for armed robbery, while his white co-defendant received 3 years for the identical crime. Same evidence, same criminal history, different skin color. Angela Davis, held without bail for writing bad checks while white defendants with identical charges walked free on personal recognizance. Carmen Martinez, given maximum sentence for shoplifting while pregnant white defendants received community service. Washington documents each injustice with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a preacher. This is why he became a federal prosecutor, to fight exactly this kind of systemic discrimination that poisons American courtrooms. The investigation reveals corruption that runs deeper than sentencing bias. Court employees describe a toxic workplace where racial slurs flow like coffee and constitutional rights die like flowers in drought. Defense attorneys share whispered stories of threats and intimidation. The courthouse culture itself is poisoned by Whitmore's 15-year reign of judicial terrorism. She called defense attorneys bleeding heart liberals if they challenged her rulings, testified court reporter Janet Murphy, her voice barely above a whisper. The stenography machine sits silent beside her as she describes years of verbal abuse. But if those attorneys were black, she used words I can't repeat on television, words that made me ashamed to work in that courtroom. Bailiff Carlos Mendez describes the judge's private meltdowns between cases. She'd rant about uppity lawyers and criminal defendants who don't know their place. She called it maintaining proper order, but we all knew what she really meant. The words she used behind closed doors would make a Klansman blush. Each testimony builds the federal case like stones in a wall of justice that will finally contain Patricia Whitmore's judicial terrorism. Dr. Washington's investigation team uncovers the Marcus Thompson file buried deep in courthouse records as evidence of murder. The manila folder contains the complete destruction of a promising young attorney's career. Marcus had filed a motion challenging Whitmore's sentencing of a 17-year-old defendant caught with marijuana. The motion was legally sound, constitutionally based, and perfectly argued. Whitmore denied it with a single dismissive sentence. Motion denied. Defense counsel's arguments are frivolous and without merit. But the file reveals the vindictive campaign that followed. Whitmore filed formal complaints with the Georgia bar, claiming Marcus had been disrespectful and unprofessional. Bow! She called the state attorney general's office, claiming Marcus had threatened her in chambers. She contacted other judges throughout the district, warning them about his radical agenda and dangerous influence on young black criminals. The documented phone calls read like a judicial hit list. Judge Harrison: "Watch out for this Thompson character. He's in trouble." Judge Bradley: "Don't let him manipulate you with civil rights nonsense." Judge Patterson: "I warned you about these activist lawyers." Marcus Thompson was blackballed across Georgia within 6 months. His practice collapsed like a house built on sand. Client referrals dried up. Other attorneys avoided him at bar association meetings. His young family faced financial ruin because he had the audacity to challenge a racist judge's illegal sentence. The suicide note is preserved in the court file like evidence of judicial murder. "I can't fight this anymore," Marcus had written in careful lawyer's handwriting. "The system protects itself and people like us don't matter. She destroyed my career because I stood up for a child. Maybe my death will mean something. Maybe someday someone will investigate what Judge Whitmore really is." Washington reads the note with tears in his eyes, his federal prosecutor's composure finally cracking. His best friend died believing the system was broken beyond repair. Marcus never knew that someday a federal prosecutor would avenge his death and vindicate his sacrifice. The media coverage intensifies as more victims emerge from the shadows. CNN dedicates entire programs to the Whitmore investigation. Legal experts analyze each revelation like archaeologists uncovering ancient crimes. The courthouse steps become a shrine where victims gather to share their stories. "What we're seeing is systematic violation of civil rights under color of law," explains former Attorney General Eric Holder during a live CNN interview. "Judge Whitmore used her position to deny equal justice based on race. This is exactly why federal civil rights laws exist, to protect Americans from officials who abuse their power." The pressure on Georgia's judicial system becomes overwhelming, like water behind a cracking dam. Chief Judge Harold Morrison calls an emergency meeting of all Superior Court judges in the state. The marble conference room buzzes with nervous energy as black-robed judges confront their profession's greatest scandal. "Patricia Whitmore has disgraced this entire judiciary," Morrison announces to the packed room. "Her actions reflect on every judge in Georgia. We must demonstrate that her behavior is an aberration, not the norm." But the investigation reveals it's not an aberration. Federal agents uncover similar patterns of discrimination in 3 other Georgia jurisdictions. Judge Whitmore's courtroom was just the most extreme example of a statewide problem that infects the justice system like cancer. The governor calls a special legislative session to address judicial reform. Civil rights organizations demand federal oversight of the entire state court system. The ripple effects spread like waves from a dropped stone, reaching courthouses across the South. Meanwhile, Judge Whitmore sits in her attorney's mahogany-paneled office, watching her world collapse on live television. The woman who once controlled life and death with a gavel now faces federal charges that could send her to prison for 20 years. Her hands shake as she clutches a coffee cup like a lifeline. "They want to offer you a plea deal," her lawyer explains, sliding papers across the polished table. The afternoon sun casts long shadows through tall windows. Guilty to civil rights violations, 5 years in federal prison. You keep your pension. 5 years? Whitmore's voice cracks like breaking glass. For maintaining order in my courtroom? For being tough on criminals? Patricia, you assaulted a federal prosecutor on camera. The evidence of discriminatory sentencing is mathematically overwhelming. The testimony from court staff is devastating. You're lucky they're not charging you with conspiracy and racketeering. The arrogance that once made her untouchable now blinds her to reality. Even facing federal prosecution, she cannot accept responsibility for 15 years of constitutional violations. This is all political persecution, she insists, her face flushed red as a stop sign. They're destroying me because I was tough on crime. Because I didn't coddle criminals and bleeding-heart liberals who want to turn America into a lawless wasteland. Her lawyer shakes his head with the sadness of someone watching a friend destroy herself. 15 years of judicial experience, and she still doesn't understand that equal justice isn't coddling. It's the Constitution. The federal grand jury convenes in Atlanta's imposing federal courthouse. 23 citizens reviewed 8 months of evidence compiled by Dr. Washington's investigation. Bank executives, teachers, retirees, small business owners, ordinary Americans who believe justice should be colorblind. The indictment reads like a legal horror story spanning multiple pages. Civil rights violations, deprivation of rights under color of law, assault on a federal officer, obstruction of justice. Each charge carries years in federal prison where Whitmore will face the same system she corrupted. When the sealed indictment is opened, Judge Patricia Whitmore becomes the first sitting Georgia judge arrested for civil rights violations in over 30 years. Federal marshals escort her from the courthouse in handcuffs while cameras capture every humiliating step. The woman who once held absolute power over other people's lives now faces the same criminal justice system she weaponized against the innocent. Dr. Washington takes no pleasure in her downfall. Standing on the courthouse steps where justice was denied for 15 years, he thinks about Marcus Thompson and hundreds of victims who never received fair trials. The system worked. Not quickly, not easily, but it worked. The Georgia Judicial Conduct Board hearing room falls silent as Judge Patricia Whitmore enters in handcuffs. Gone is the commanding presence that once terrorized defendants and attorneys. Her silver hair hangs limp around her pale face. The black robes of judicial authority have been replaced by an Orange County jail jumpsuit that screams defendant louder than any gavel. The irony tastes bitter as copper pennies. The woman who spent 15 years judging others now sits where her victims once sat, powerless, humiliated, facing a system designed to crush the guilty. Board Chairman Judge William Hayes calls the emergency hearing to order. The marble chamber echoes with the weight of precedent as 5 distinguished judges prepare to strip their colleague of everything she once held sacred. This hearing will determine whether Judge Patricia Whitmore should be removed from the bench for conduct unbecoming a judicial officer, Hayes announces. His voice carries the solemnity of a funeral director. Dr. Washington takes the witness stand with the quiet dignity of someone who has testified before the Supreme Court. The red mark on his cheek has faded, but the video evidence burns bright on screens throughout the chamber. 200 million Americans have watched Judge Whitmore assault a federal prosecutor. The footage plays again now, each frame a nail in her judicial coffin. Dr. Washington, please describe what occurred in Judge Whitmore's courtroom on Tuesday, September 12th. Washington's testimony unfolds like a legal masterpiece. He describes 8 months of undercover investigation with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a preacher seeking justice for the voiceless. Judge Whitmore demonstrated a pattern of discriminatory behavior that violated the constitutional rights of hundreds of defendants, he states, his voice steady as granite. Her assault on me was not an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of 15 years of unchecked judicial misconduct. The statistics flow like water breaking through a dam. 40% longer sentences for black defendants. Constitutional motions denied without legal basis. Due process was violated so routinely, it became standard operating procedure. But then Washington shifts to the personal cost of Whitmore's reign of terror. Marcus Thompson was my closest friend and a brilliant attorney who died because Judge Whitmore destroyed his career for challenging her illegal sentence of a 17-year-old defendant. His voice breaks slightly. Marcus believed the system was broken beyond repair. Today proves he was wrong. The hearing room gallery is packed with Whitmore's victims. Families who lost sons and fathers to excessive sentences. Attorneys who faced retaliation for doing their jobs. Court employees who endured years of racial harassment in toxic silence. Teresa Williams takes the stand, her hands trembling like leaves in the winter wind. Judge Whitmore looked at my son and saw a criminal instead of a college student. She gave him 5 years for marijuana while white defendants got probation for identical charges. The testimonies pile up like evidence at a crime scene. Each story reveals another layer of corruption, another violation of the oath every judge swears to uphold. Judge Whitmore's attorney makes a desperate final argument. Your Honors, my client served this community faithfully for 15 years. One moment of poor judgment shouldn't destroy a distinguished career. Poor judgment. The words hang in the air like smoke from a crashed airplane, as if systematic racial discrimination spanning 15 years could be dismissed as a momentary lapse in reasoning. Board Chairman Hayes doesn't need to deliberate long. The evidence is overwhelming, the precedent clear, the duty unavoidable. Judge Patricia Whitmore, this board finds you have violated every principle of judicial conduct. Your behavior has brought disgrace upon the entire judiciary. You are hereby removed from office, effective immediately. The gavel falls like thunder. 15 years of judicial authority erased in a single moment. But the federal criminal trial awaits, and federal prison doesn't care about distinguished careers or judicial immunity. 3 weeks later, Whitmore stands in a different courtroom facing a different judge. Federal District Judge Maria Rodriguez reads the verdict with the calm authority of constitutional justice. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. Civil rights violations, assault on a federal officer, deprivation of rights under color of law. The convictions carry mandatory minimum sentences that will keep Whitmore in federal prison until she's 75 years old. Your abuse of judicial power caused immeasurable harm to countless victims, Judge Rodriguez states during sentencing. You weaponized the justice system against the very people it was designed to protect. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The courthouse steps fill with celebration as news spreads. Malik Stevens stands with his grandmother, both crying tears of vindication. The engineering degree in his hand represents more than academic achievement. It symbolizes justice delayed but not denied. Dr. Washington addresses the media gathered like pilgrims seeking truth. Today proves that no one is above the law in America. Not judges, not prosecutors, not police officers. When public officials violate civil rights, the federal government will hold them accountable. The systematic review of Whitmore's cases begins immediately. Hundreds of sentences will be reduced. Dozens of convictions will be overturned. The scales of justice, bent for 15 years by prejudice and hatred, finally balance again. But the real victory isn't measured in overturned convictions or federal prison sentences. The real victory is that the system worked. 6 months after Judge Whitmore's conviction, the courthouse steps smell of fresh hope instead of old injustice. Dr. Washington stands where he was once arrested, now addressing a crowd of legal reform advocates. The federal building behind him gleams in afternoon sunlight like a beacon of accountability. His voice carries the quiet confidence of someone who proved the system can work when good people refuse to stay silent. Change doesn't happen overnight, he tells the assembled crowd. But it happens when citizens demand better from their public officials. the ripple effects continue spreading like waves across still water. Congress passes the Judicial Accountability Act, requiring federal oversight of state courts with documented bias patterns. Law schools now teach mandatory courses on implicit bias and constitutional justice. The American Bar Association creates new ethics standards for challenging discriminatory judges. Malik Stevens walks across the graduation stage at Georgia Tech, his engineering degree earned with a perfect 4.0 GPA. The scholarship that Judge Whitmore almost destroyed now funds other students facing similar injustices. His success story inspires a generation of young people who learned that fighting back against corrupt systems isn't just possible. It's necessary. The courthouse where Whitmore once reigned in terror now operates under federal monitoring. New Judge Sarah Chen, an Asian-American civil rights attorney, treats every defendant with the dignity the Constitution demands. Sentencing disparities have disappeared. Constitutional motions receive fair consideration. Justice is colorblind again. In federal prison, Patricia Whitmore serves her 12-year sentence in the same system she corrupted for 15 years. She shares a cell block with drug dealers, check forgers, and tax evaders, the same types of defendants she once condemned with racist rhetoric. The irony tastes bitter as prison food. But perhaps the most meaningful change happens in law schools across America, where Marcus Thompson's story is now taught as a cautionary tale about standing up to judicial corruption. His suicide wasn't meaningless after all. His death sparked the investigation that brought down a racist judge and reformed an entire system. Dr. Washington visits Marcus's grave every year on the anniversary of his death. The headstone reads, "Marcus Thompson, Esquire." He fought for justice. Fresh flowers appear regularly from attorneys who heard his story and chose to fight rather than stay silent. The federal investigation expands beyond Georgia's borders. Similar patterns emerge in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. Corrupt judges face federal prosecution. Discriminatory sentences get overturned. The Department of Justice creates a new civil rights task force specifically targeting judicial misconduct. Real reform takes time, but the momentum builds like an avalanche of accountability. Citizen court-watching programs monitor judicial behavior. Legal aid organizations receive increased funding to challenge unfair sentences. Bar associations expel attorneys who enable discriminatory judges. The children who watched their parents face Judge Whitmore's biased courtroom now grow up in a world where federal prosecutors go undercover to protect civil rights. They see that fighting corruption isn't just possible, it's patriotic. Dr. Washington returns to his office in the Department of Justice, where his next investigation awaits. The fight for equal justice never ends, but neither does the determination of those who believe America can live up to its highest ideals. The system isn't perfect. It never will be. But when good people refuse to accept injustice, when federal prosecutors risk their safety to gather evidence, when citizens demand accountability from their public officials, that's when change happens. That's when America works the way it was designed to work. Have you ever witnessed injustice in a courtroom? Share your story in the comments below. Like this video if you believe in holding corrupt officials accountable, and subscribe for more stories proving that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Because when we fight together, the system can work for everyone.